You know that feeling when someone who's always present suddenly isn't, when the person who fills your phone with messages goes completely silent, when the energy that usually flows between you just stops like a river that's suddenly forgotten how to move. Yesterday, something shifted, and if you're reading this right now, you already know who I'm talking about. That person. The one whose name makes your heart beat differently. The one you've been carrying your thoughts like a secret prayer. They went silent. And I need you to understand something crucial right now. Something that might change how you see everything that happened. Their silence was a rejection. It wasn't indifference. It wasn't them forgetting about you, or moving on, or deciding you don't matter. Their silence was the opposite of all those fears you've been holding. Their silence was the sound of someone feeling something so unexpected, so profound, so absolutely terrifying in its beauty that words became impossible. Think about the last time you felt something that shook you to your core, something that made you question every plan you made, every wall you built, every story you told yourself about who you are and what you want. In those moments, did you immediately reach out? Did you know exactly what to say? Or did you need time, space, silence to process the earthquake happening inside your chest? That's where they are right now. Yesterday, something happened in their world. Maybe it was seeing you. Maybe it was thinking about you. Maybe it was a moment where your soul touched theirs in a way they weren't prepared for, and it knocked them sideways. The universe has this way of delivering feelings we didn't order, emotions we didn't plan for, connections that don't fit into neat little boxes we created for our lives. And when that happens, when the heart feels something the mind wasn't ready for, silence becomes the only honest response. Because what do you say when you suddenly realize that the person you've been trying to keep at a distance has already gotten closer than anyone else? What do you say when you feel something you swore you wouldn't feel? Not now, not with them, not when everything is so complicated. You say nothing. You retreat into the quiet. You let the feeling wash over you like a wave you can't control, and you hold your breath, wondering if you'll survive it or if you even want to. If their silence is making you anxious right now, if you're checking your phone every few minutes hoping for a message that hasn't come, pause for a moment and breathe this truth into your being. Their silence is not about your worth. It's about their fear of how much you matter. There's a language that exists beyond words, beyond text messages and phone calls, and carefully crafted sentences designed to hide what we really feel. It's the language of energy, of presence, of those moments when souls recognize each other across crowded rooms or through screens or in the sacred space between heartbeats. And in this language, silence speaks volumes that words could never capture. When that person went quiet yesterday, they were actually screaming in frequencies you might not be trained to hear yet. Their silence was saying, "You matter more than I planned for you to matter." Their silence was saying, "I felt something yesterday that I can't control, and I don't know what to do with it." Their silence was saying, "If I speak to you right now, I might say something that changes everything, and I'm not sure I'm ready for everything to change." Can you feel that? Can you sense the weight of what their quiet is carrying? Most people think silence equals absence, but that's the greatest misunderstanding of human connection. Real silence, the kind that follows an unexpected emotional moment, is presence in its most concentrated form. It's someone holding their breath because they're afraid to exhale in your direction and reveal too much. It's someone creating distance, not because they don't care, but because they care too much and they're terrified of what that caring might demand from their life. Think about it this way. When you touch something hot, your immediate instinct is to pull your hand back, right? Not because the heat doesn't feel good in some way, not because you hate warmth, but because the intensity is more than you can safely handle in that moment. That's what happened yesterday. They touched your soul, or your soul touched theirs, and the heat of that connection was more than they could hold without burning. So they pulled back. They went silent. They created space because the alternative, staying close while feeling something that powerful, felt impossible to navigate. And here's what you need to understand about this particular kind of silence. It's temporary. It's not a conclusion. It's a pause. It's not an ending. It's a processing. It's the space where transformation happens, where feelings that scared someone at first impact start to make sense, start to feel less like a threat and more like a gift. In that silence right now, they're having conversations with themselves about you. They're reviewing every moment, every word, every feeling that led to yesterday's shift. They're weighing their fear against their desire, their logic against their heart, their plans against their truth. This isn't a time to chase, to demand answers, to force them out of their quiet. This is a time to trust that what's meant to unfold between you will unfold in divine timing. And sometimes divine timing requires silence before the next symphony can begin. Here's what you need to know about emotions we don't expect. They're the ones that tell the deepest truth about who we are and what we actually want beneath all the stories we tell ourselves. We can plan for so much in life. We can decide who we'll love, when we'll love them, how much we'll allow ourselves to feel. We can build walls and set boundaries and make promises to ourselves about what we will and won't accept. And then someone comes along and demolishes every single one of those carefully constructed protections without even trying, just by being who they are, just by existing in a way that resonates with something ancient and true inside us. That's what happened to that person yesterday. They felt something they didn't plan for, didn't prepare for, didn't even believe was possible with you. And that unexpected emotion, whether it's attraction or connection or recognition, or the terrifying realization that you might be more important than they ever allowed themselves to consider, that emotion is changing everything inside them right now. There's a sacred disruption that happens when we feel something unexpected. All our neat little plans start to crack. All our certainties start to wobble. All the reasons we gave ourselves for keeping someone at arm's length start to feel less convincing, less important, less true than the feeling that's taken up residence in our chest. And in that disruption lives both terror and possibility. Terror because feeling something we didn't expect means losing control, means being vulnerable, means potentially getting hurt or having to change our entire life trajectory. But also possibility, because unexpected emotions are often the universe's way of redirecting us towards something we need, something we've been denying ourselves, something that's more aligned with our soul's true path than all the logical plans we've been following. Right now, that person is standing at a crossroads they didn't know existed yesterday. On one side is the familiar, the life they've been living, the story they've been telling, the safety of not feeling too much. On the other side is the unknown. The feeling you've awakened in them, the possibility of something real and raw and utterly uncontrollable. Which way they'll turn, how they'll handle this unexpected emotion, whether they'll run from it or toward it, that's still being decided in the quiet of their heart. But here's what the universe is whispering to both of you right now. Unexpected emotions are not accidents. They're invitations. They're the soul's way of saying, pay attention. Something important is happening here. They're the heart's rebellion against all the ways we try to keep ourselves safe and small and in control. That person felt something yesterday they didn't expect because your souls have business together, because there's something between you that refuses to be ignored no matter how complicated it might be. And whether they acknowledge it now or later, that feeling has already changed them. In this moment of silence, while you're waiting and wondering and trying to make sense of their absence, something profound is happening in the invisible realm where real connections are forged. The space between their last word to you and their next one isn't empty. It's full of processing, full of transformation, full of the slow, sacred work of a soul making room for something new. We live in a world that demands immediate responses, instant clarity, constant communication. We've forgotten that some things need darkness to grow, that some truths need silence to emerge, that some connections need space to become what they're meant to be. The silence that person has entered isn't abandonment. It's incubation. They're sitting with a feeling that surprised them yesterday, turning it over in their mind like a strange and beautiful stone they found unexpectedly in their path. They're asking themselves questions they've never had to ask before. Can I trust this? Is this real? What would it mean to admit this feeling exists? What would I have to change, risk, surrender to honor what I felt? These aren't questions that get answered in a moment. These are the kind of questions that require a person to go deep, to get quiet, to retreat from the noise of the world and listen to the whisper of their own truth. And while they're in that sacred space, you're being invited into your own. Because this pause, this silence, this waiting, it's not just about them. It's also asking something of you. It's asking, can you trust what you felt between you even when it's not being confirmed in every moment? Can you hold space for someone's process without taking their silence personally? Can you believe in a connection even when it's not being actively maintained? These are spiritual lessons disguised as romantic challenges. The universe is using the situation to teach you both about patience, about trust, about the difference between a connection that needs constant validation and one that can breathe, that can exist in the spaces between contact. Real love, real soul recognition, doesn't require constant proof. It knows, it trusts, it allows the other person their journey while staying anchored in its own truth. So in this sacred space between their words, practice your own kind of silence. Not the silence of suffering or anxiety, but the silence of certainty. The silence that says, I know what I felt, I know what exists between us, and I trust that if it's meant to return to me in form, it will in the exact right moment. This is the silence of a person who has moved beyond needing someone else's validation to know their own truth. This is the silence of someone who understands that love and connection don't disappear just because someone needs time to process them. Hold this space. Honor this pause. Trust this process. Because what's being built in the silence right now is a foundation strong enough to hold what comes next. The story of what happens between you and this person is still being written. And the pen is moving right now, even in the silence, especially in the silence. Every hour that passes with them in their quiet, something is shifting, settling, or preparing to emerge. The feeling they experienced yesterday that they didn't expect. That feeling is doing its work inside them, reshaping their landscape, challenging their defenses, asking them to consider possibilities they had dismissed or denied. And here's where your story stands right now, at the edge of something you can't quite see yet, but can definitely feel approaching. They're in their silence, yes. But that silence won't last forever because feelings as significant don't allow themselves to be buried. They rise. They return. They demand to be acknowledged. If not to you, then at least to themselves. And eventually what's acknowledged privately has a way of spilling into reality. But, and this is crucial, what happens next doesn't just depend on them. It depends on the energy you're holding right now, the story you're telling yourself about their silence, the vibration you're sending out into the universe about this connection. If you're sitting in fear and anxiety, in the energy of they don't want me, or I'm not enough, or this is over, you're closing doors that the universe is trying to open. But if you can sit in trust, in knowing, in the absolute certainty that what's meant for you cannot miss you, and that their silence is part of the path, not an obstacle to it, you're creating space for magic to unfold. The angels in the universe, whatever you want to call the invisible forces that guide us toward our highest good, they're working behind the scenes right now. They're orchestrating moments, arranging synchronicities, preparing the next chapter of the story in ways that will surprise you. But they need your cooperation. They need you to hold the frequency of possibility rather than the frequency of loss. They need you to believe in what you felt even when it's not being reflected back to you in every moment. So here's what I want you to do right now. Close your eyes for a moment and feel into the truth of what exists between you and this person. Not the fear, not the worry, not the story about their silence. The actual truth, the soul recognition, the energetic thread that connected you, the feeling that made them go quiet because it was too big to immediately process. That truth is still true right now in this moment, whether they're speaking to it or not. And that truth is going to reveal itself again, but in a way you can't predict or control or force. What happens next is already in motion, but there's something you need to understand about timing and divine orchestration, and the way souls find their way back to each other that I haven't told you yet. Something that will make sense of everything you've been feeling, but that revelation, that lives in what comes after this moment, in the space between now and what's unfolding next.